Hello, and welcome to Small Town Mysteries, a show where three longtime friends from Massachusetts tell crazy and heartbreaking true stories filled with the extra flair of small town mystery. I'm Kate, here with Christine
Hello.
and Rachel,
Hello.
bringing you our next episode on the Yuba County Five. But before we get into that, I'm going to toss it over to Rachel, who will be highlighting our missing person for this week. Rach?
Today I am covering the disappearance of Reina Carolina Morales Rojas, who was last seen November 26, 2022, so almost a year now, in Boston, Massachusetts. She's female, Hispanic. She's 41 years old at the time of disappearance, so she's probably 42 now. She's 5'5", she weighs 145 pounds. She has brown hair. She changes her hair frequently, and she uses wigs. So for hair, it says brown, blonde, and black. She has brown eyes, and a distinguishing characteristic about her is that she has a tattoo on her abdomen of flowers. She was last seen departing a friend's residence in Somerville, Massachusetts on November 26, 2022, and has not been heard from since. She was last seen wearing dark-colored sandals, slides, leggings, tights, a black-colored top, a gray-colored zippered hooded sweater, knit hat, and carrying a black-colored backpack. She had at least 2 cell phones, which were both powered off after midnight on November 27th, 2022. So that's kind of strange. She's from El Salvador. She recently immigrated from El Salvador, and it says that she does not speak English. And she'd only been in the greater Boston area since May of 2022. So the Boston Police Department is asking for any assistance in locating Rojas or obtaining additional information regarding her disappearance. Any tips or additional information, please contact the Boston Police Department at 857-274-4300, or you can contact the FBI at 800-634-4097.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll have pictures of Raina on our Instagram account at Small Town Mysteries Pod the day this episode releases. So if you live in that area, please check that out to see if you may have any information that would be helpful to locating Raina, hopefully safely. All right, Christine, all yours.
So this week is a listener suggestion from Kelly. She asked a little bit ago, have you guys researched the Yuba County Five? It's from my hometown. Well, she said one of them because she's lived in a few different places. Yeah, so I'm doing that today.
Thanks, Kelly.
So yes, this case is known as the Yuba County Five, and it is a case in which 5 young men attended a basketball game one night in 1978, and then afterward were later either found dead or missing. Kind of something that was heavily stated in the media that is kind of important to keep in your minds throughout, I guess, this case, is that each of these men did either have mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions. And I'll get a little bit into why that might matter later on.
Okay.
For some background, the men who compromised the Yuba County Five were Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Hewitt, 24, Ted Weir, 32, Jack Madruga, 30, and Gary Mathias, 25. Mathias had been stationed in West Germany as part of his United States Army service throughout the early 1970s. And while stationed there, he did develop drug problems, which eventually led him to being diagnosed with schizophrenia and being given a psychiatric discharge. Gary was a native to Yuba City in California, hence the name of the group. Yuba City is, as its name suggests, a city, though it has seen a ton of growth in recent years. Currently, the population is around 70,000, but back in 1980, it was only about 13,000. Geographically, it is in Northern California, around 40 miles north of Sacramento. So after his discharge, Mathias returned to his parents' home in Yuba City, and he started treatment at a local psychiatric hospital. It was pretty difficult at first, with Mathias being almost arrested for assault twice and experiencing several psychiatric episodes. but by 1978, he was being treated on an outpatient basis and was considered by his physicians to be an example of a really great success story. So at this time, Matthias was close friends with four men who all lived around the same area. And by all of their families, they were just known as the boys due to how close all of them were. Their favorite leisure activity was sports, with their families later stating that if they were getting together, it was likely to either play a game or to watch one. Together, they played basketball on a team called the Gateway Gators, which was supported by a local program for people with disabilities. So, getting a little bit into their disappearance, on February 25th, the Gators were due to play their first game in a week-long tournament sponsored by the Special Olympics. The winners of this tournament would get a free week in Los Angeles,
Wow.
presumably staying there.
What a nice prize.
I know, right? The men had prepared the night before, with some even laying out their uniforms and asking their parents, like, you got to wake me up on time. Like, I got to be ready for this. That night, they decided to drive to Chico on the 24th, the day before, to cheer on the UC Davis basketball team in an away game. Madruga was the one who drove the group. It was around 50 miles north to the Chico State campus in his turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. All five men only wore light coats despite the cool temperatures in the upper Sacramento Valley at night that time of the year. UC Davis won the game that night, and afterward the group decided to go to a nearby market in downtown Chico. There they got some snacks, some soda and milk to drink, and that was shortly prior to the store's closing time at 10 p.m. One of the store employees remembers this pretty well because she was pretty annoyed that a group came in right before she was going to close up for the night.
Yeah, I mean that's relatable. That's relatable.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
kind of just the default emotion when someone shows up right before closing.
Yeah. It's just the reality of working.
Yep. But sadly, after this point, none of the men were seen alive again, at least that we know for certain. Some of the parents even waited up to make sure that their sons returned, but when morning came and there was still no sign of them, and after, calling each other to see if any of the other men had gotten home that night, the police were notified because no one had seen them. All right, and as for the investigation, so police in Yuba and other nearby counties started searching along the route the men took toward Chico. They initially did not find any sign of them, but several days later, a Plumas National Forest ranger told investigators that he had seen a Montego parked along a road in the forest on February 25th. At that point, the ranger didn't think anything of it because I guess it was pretty common for cars to be parked even at that time of the year due to skiing and winter sports. But after he had read the missing persons bulletin board, he recognized the car and led officers to it on the 28th of February. Inside the car, there was evidence that the men had been in it since they had last been seen by the store clerk, because there were empty wrappers, cartons, and cans in the car, along with programs from the basketball game they had attended, and a neatly folded roadmap of California. Along with the discovery of the car came many questions about where it was and why. It was found 70 miles from Chico, and it was nowhere near any of their houses. None of the families of the men could speculate as to why they would be there, never mind why they had driven up a long and winding dirt road on a winter night into a high elevation remote forest. And all of this without carrying any extra clothing on the night before the basketball game that they had been eagerly awaiting.
And they had no jacket. You
Right.
said that. What the heck?
That
Yeah.
is exceedingly bizarre.
I don't know. It makes me feel like they had to be led there because it's not like they're just
Mhm.
gonna be oh, here we go. We're not wearing anything. I don't know. It doesn't seem like something you would plan to do.
On a very surface level basis, it reminds me of the Dyatlov Pass.
That actually is, so on the Wikipedia page, yeah, so it's like see also, and it's the first one that comes up, and it says that the case of the Yuba County Five is often referred to as the American Dyatlov Pass.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I've heard of the American Dyatlov Pass case, and I'm familiar with the regular Dyatlov Pass case, but I was like, wow, it sounds just like it. Especially because one of the prevailing theories was that they were led up there, that they didn't go up of their own volition because they didn't have resources that they would need to be in, that climate, that time of year, that time of night. So that they had to have been, led there or persuaded to go there. Thank you. That tracks.
Yeah,
yes,
no problem. So additionally, none of the men were really known to be particularly, I don't know if you could say, fond of nature. It wasn't their thing. Like, there was
Outdoorsy.
no really history of them going hiking or like, this
Mhm.
wasn't really in line with behavior that they would typically engage in.
Well, you know what? I feel like my family would say that about me too. If my mom texted me and was like, "Hey, where are you?" and I said I'm on a hike, she would probably call the police. So I'm not even kidding. Like,
That's hilarious.
Honestly, if I ever called somebody like in the dead of winter, being like I'm on a hike, call for help.
yeah, that's
people wait for
the
that.
winter is the added element there. Definitely not in the winter.
No.
Maybe on like a cool summer day, if I had just gotten a really good sale on cute hiking boots, maybe, yeah, I'll go on like a hike, and it's gonna be like Blue Hills, known for being an easy hike. But if it was middle of winter and it was like, yeah, I'm on a hike, red flag.
Yeah, definitely. So at this point, police had no idea why the men might have abandoned their car. They were about 4,400 feet up in elevation, which was right around where the snow line was at that point of year. So they were up there.
I don't have a comparative context for that. Do you know that's really high, right? Like,
it's almost it's getting close to a mile up, right? Because a mile is
right.
5,280.
Why do you know that?
Is it? Yeah, 5,280.
What the heck? Christine, you amaze me every day. I really didn't expect you to know that off the top of your head, but I'm very impressed that you do. Okay, so almost a mile up, so that's it's pretty high altitude. Okay.
It is. It's high altitude.
So yeah, so I feel like then also your body starts getting weird at that. Like, the higher you get, like, your ears pop and it can be uncomfortable and the air's thin and it's like a whole thing. I just don't know. I can't imagine people willingly doing that unless they were like nature people.
Prepared.
And
also,
prepared,
like,
prepared
so.
being the necessary.
Like, that's a whole element of like, you don't just do that.
Outdoorsy people always are prepared. Like, they don't just go for a hike and they just, roll up in their car in Converse and just climb a mountain. It's like you have provisions in your bag. You have water stored appropriately. You have appropriate shoes. This is not the kind of situation that you would expect for like any type of casual hangout.
No.
Especially not for a group of guys that were kind of sporty, athletic, liked to go to games and play games. Like, yeah, maybe one of them could say, hey, let's go for a hike. And the other ones would be like, yeah, that sounds fun, but still doesn't strike me as plausible.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The car was stuck in snowdrifts, and there was evidence that the man or someone had tried to spin the wheels to get it out. But police noted that the snow was not deep enough that 5 healthy young men wouldn't be able to push it out. The keys were not found, suggesting that the car could have been abandoned due to it not functioning properly, with the intention of them returning to the car later with help. But when police hotwired the car, the engine immediately started, and the fuel gauge showed that the car still had about a quarter of gas left. And then for a more thorough examination, the police towed the car back to the station, where they found it had no dents, gouges, or even mud scrapes, despite it having a very low-hanging muffler and having been driven a long distance up a mountain road littered with numerous bumps and ruts. And to them, I'm not familiar with the road, but to them, they said that it indicated that the person driving the car was either extremely careful or that they knew the road well.
I think that might add credence to the someone else took them up the mountain theory.
Maybe. The car was unlocked and had a window rolled down when it was discovered, and Madruga's family stated that it was unlike him to leave his car so unsecured.
Well, again, leaving your window down in the middle of the winter.
I know. Yeah,
Like,
I
that's just
also found
weird.
that very strange.
Yeah, I would never do that. Just
Mm-mm.
on impulse. Too cold.
Way too cold. Further efforts to search the area were hampered when a severe snowstorm came in that day. 2 days later, searchers and snowcats almost got lost themselves, and additional search efforts were called off due to the continuing bad weather. No trace of the men were found other than what was in the car at this point. Police did receive several reports of sightings of the men after they had left Chico, including reports that they were seen in other parts of California or even the country. Though the majority of these reports were easily kind of tossed aside and negated, a couple did seem that they could be of significance. The first was from Joseph Scones of Sacramento. He told police he inadvertently wound up spending the night of February 24th to 25th near where the Montego was found. He had driven up there where he had a cabin to check on things in advance of a weekend ski trip with his family. At 5:30 p.m., Scones had gotten his car stuck in the snow. In the process of trying to free it, he realized that he was beginning to experience the early symptoms of a heart attack, and he went back in the car, keeping the engine running for heat. Several hours later, while he was in the car and experiencing severe pain, Scones saw headlights coming up behind him. He saw a car parked behind him, headlights on, and a group of people around it, one of which seemed to be a woman holding a baby. He called out to the group for help, but they stopped talking and turned their headlights off. Later, Scones saw flashlights behind him, but when he called out for help, the flashlights turned off.
That's weird, to say the least.
I think that's weird too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, not right.
So at some point, Scones told the police that he saw a pickup truck parked behind him briefly, and then it could just continued onto the road. Later, he did tell the police that he could not be completely sure of this due to him being almost delirious with pain at that point in the night. So after his car ran out of gas in the early morning hours, his pain subsided enough for him to walk 8 miles down the road to a lodge.
Jeez.
I know.
You had a heart attack and you're going to walk 8 miles.
8 miles.
Whew.
Like, what the heck? So when he got to the lodge, the manager drove him back home, and they did pass the abandoned Montego at this point, which was located around where he recalled hearing the voices coming from. Doctors later confirmed that he had indeed experienced a mild heart attack that night. The second report came from a woman who worked at a store in the small town of Brownsville, which was about 30 miles from where the car had been abandoned. After seeing flyers regarding their disappearance, the woman went to the police on March 3rd, telling them that 4 of the men had stopped at the store she worked at in a red pickup truck the day after their disappearance. And remember, Scones did say he thought he saw a pickup truck earlier as well. The owner of the store did corroborate the employee's account. The woman stated 2 of the men, who she recalled being Hewitt and Sterling, she saw them in a telephone booth outside of the store while the other 2 went inside. The police noted this person as a credible witness, and they took this account seriously. The store owner told investigators that men who he thought to be Weir and Hewitt had come into the store and brought burritos, chocolate milk, and soft drinks. And now we're going to get into discovery of some of the bodies. Due to the little evidence the police had pointing toward any solid direction regarding what had happened to these men, they were not going to rule out the possibility of foul play. But on June 4th, with most of the higher elevation snow finally melted, a group of motorcyclists went to a trailer/camp that was at a campsite around 20 miles from where the Montego was discovered. The front window of the trailer had been broken, and when they opened the door, they were overcome by the odor of what turned out to be a decaying body inside.
Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And later, the body was identified as Weir's. The next day, officers searched the road between the trailer and the Montego. They found the remains of those later identified as Madruga and Sterling on opposite sides of the road and around 11 miles from where the car had been. Madruga's body had been partially consumed by animals, and only bones remained of Sterling's body. Autopsies showed that they both died of hypothermia. Officers believe that one of them could have given in to the need to sleep that comes with the last stages of hypothermia, while the other stayed by his side and died the same way.
That sounds reasonable.
2 days after this, as part of a search party, Hewitt's father found his son's backbone under a bush, which is horrifying.
Oh my God. Don't they usually, maybe this is
my.
more of a modern thing, but don't they usually limit the amount of actual searching that like family members do to avoid this?
I
I
feel
don't
like they
know.
should.
I've heard that in some cases, like if it's their child or loved one, that they'll help with the search, but they don't actually do the searching so that there isn't a chance for them to actually find their loved one's remains.
Yeah.
I guess that didn't apply here, but I can't imagine something more horrifying than that.
So this was about 2 miles northeast of the trailer. His shoes and jeans nearby helped identify the body. The next day, a deputy sheriff found a skull downhill from the bush, confirmed by dental records later to have been Hewitt's. And his death was also attributed to hypothermia.
Taking off the shoes and the pants would be a hypothermia
Mm,
reaction as well.
right. Since Matthias had presumably not taken his medication, at this point, pictures of him were distributed to psychiatric institutions all over California, but no trace of him has ever been found.
It's so weird. The other four,
I know.
they were not found alive, but they were found. And then to have the fifth one just
Not
in
be
the wind, I mean, granted at this point it's been 40 years. So you have to wonder
Right.
if there's any physical evidence left out in those woods at this point that would be retrievable to ID that body, or, like he's just gone.
I don't know. Maybe they just didn't find him. Like, that's possible. Like, think how far they were found from each other in the first place. Like, that's so much to cover.
The search radius would have to be massive. The fact that
'Cause 11
the car
miles?
to the trailer was 11 miles and the bodies were found all kind of within that 11 miles. That's a huge search radius, especially if this is like a deeply
Yeah.
wooded area in the winter. I think it's entirely possible that they just never found his remains, but who am I to
Also,
know?
like, wildlife, too. Like, there's so many
Yeah.
factors.
Well, and especially because two of the other bodies had been.
Animals, yeah. All right, and then getting a little bit into what was actually found in the trailer, which I think this part is one of the most weirdest parts. Weir's body was found on a bed with 8 sheets wrapped around it, including
What?
wrapped around his head. The autopsy showed he had died from a combination of starvation and hypothermia. Weir had lost nearly half of his 200 pounds, with the growth of his beard suggesting that he had lived as long as 13 weeks from when he had last shaved, and that was
My
pretty
gosh.
recently. So he could have been up there for, I saw, anywhere from 8 to 13 weeks.
That's crazy.
Holy shit.
Because, I'm sitting here assuming, they probably all died relatively quickly after going missing. But no,
Yeah,
that's
no,
a long
not
time to live in the
necessarily.
wilderness. I wonder how the weather was for those 13 weeks.
Fucking cold.
Well, yeah,
Probably.
but I'm just trying to imagine why they wouldn't travel, like try to walk for help again.
Maybe it was just so cold.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously it was very
Snow
cold,
and,
so
like-
that would be the most obvious reason why they wouldn't.
But it's weird because obviously there's no way he was the last one that died. If
I
his
would
body
imagine he
was
could have been
covered-
the first one who died, and that's why the
Yeah,
other
that's
one
what you would
left.
think. But then you
Right.
think about it, and what you said, 14 weeks?
13.
Yeah, and 8 to
13?
13.
And he was the first one that died?
It almost sounds to me like he died and they realized, oh shoot, we're not gonna be able to survive out here, wrapped up his body, and then they left to go get help and then died subsequently. But like I said, who am I to know?
On a table next to the bed were some of his personal items, including his wallet with cash in it, a nickel ring, and a gold necklace. Also on the table was a gold watch, which Weir's family said was not his, and a partially melted candle. He was wearing a shirt and lightweight pants, but his shoes could not be found.
Okay. The fact that he didn't have shoes like kind of makes sense, because if he was the first to die and they were gonna like go out in the wilderness, I wouldn't be surprised if they took his shoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Especially if one of them had like shoes that wouldn't hold up as well.
that's what they kind of thought.
And also, if hypothermia, like we know that's what they
It swells
died
your
of.
feet.
So like that's the first. Yeah, it's the first thing like that goes is like your feet and your hands, because they're most distal.
Investigators were kind of puzzled as to how Weir had come to his fate. No fire had been set in the trailer's fireplace, despite a large supply of matches and paperback novels to use as kindling. Heavy forestry clothing, which could have been used to keep the men warm, remained where it had been stored. A dozen cans from a storage shed outside had been opened and their contents consumed, but a locker in the same shed that held an even greater assortment of dehydrated foods, enough to keep all 5 men fed for a year, had not been opened. Similarly, another shed nearby held a butane tank with a valve that, had it been opened and the valve turned, would have fed the trailer's heating system.
I guess that comes down to if these men would have been aware of, the presence of the locker with the additional food or the presence of the butane tank and also an ability to use it. What if it was, like maybe they were like, well, that's a tank, probably would heat us up, but they didn't know how to use it. I imagine that would be a conundrum, to have all of the tools you need for survival in front of you, but either not be aware of their existence or how to use them effectively.
I think the weirdest one is that the fireplace wasn't used.
That is weird.
It's the
Yeah.
matches were there, and then the kindling was there, and that's all you need.
Especially if they were cold.
Yeah.
Right.
And you would also think, like, so the locker was right next to the other food. So you would think that
They would have searched elsewhere for like more food, like after finding the first supply.
if you were starving and hungry, I feel like you would search everywhere.
Right.
So I don't know.
Part of me feels like that either like they ate something that was bad, or like I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
So this is also where, like, the other thing I mentioned comes in. Like, they did have intellectual disabilities.
Yeah.
And Weir's family members did say, like, at least on his end, he did lack some common sense as a result of the intellectual disability. In the past, for examples, they gave that, like, he would ask why he should stop at a stop sign. And then, like, one night he had to be dragged out of bed during a house fire because he was afraid he would miss his job if he got up. So it wasn't completely, I don't know.
Right. No, I get what you're saying. Like things that, we would think would be common sense.
Right.
He just
May not have come naturally.
May not have had the necessary problem solving skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, I'm cold and I look at a box of matches and a pile of paperbacks and an empty fireplace. And I'm like, I'm going to light these books on fire to keep myself warm. That connection may not necessarily have happened.
Especially after going through whatever they had to get through to even get to the trailer in the first place.
Yeah, at least walking 11 miles in the snow. I mean, that in and of itself would be enough, regardless of any trauma they suffered.
Right. I feel like even that would cause you to maybe, like, think differently or not think straight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it is also important to note that it did seem as if Weir was not alone in the trailer, and that Matthias and possibly Hewitt had been there with him. Matthias's tennis sneakers were in the trailer, and the cans had been opened with a P38 can opener, which only Matthias or Madruga would have been familiar with from their military service. The sheets all over Weir's body also suggested that one of the others had been there with him, as his gangrenous feet would have been in too much pain for him to pull them over his body himself. So there's probably other people there with him. Getting into some of the last part, which is just some theories. Despite knowing that 4 of the 5 men died there, officers still did have a lot of questions as to why the men were there in the first place. They did eventually learn that Matthias had friends in the small town of Forbestown, which was kind of close by, and police thought that it was possible that in an attempt to visit them on the way home, the men could have taken a wrong turn that put them on the mountain road. For some reason, unbeknownst to us, the men left the Montego and instead of going back down the road they had just gone up, maybe decided to continue on in the direction that they had been going. But that does, like, that sort of purposeful motion, like, that is not consistent with the circular patterns traveled by those who genuinely believe that they're lost. So it doesn't really add up. The day before the men went missing, a snowcat had gone along the road in that direction to clear snow off the trailer roof so it would not collapse. And police believe that it was possible the group decided to follow its tracks to wherever they led in the belief that shelter was not too far away. It's likely that Madruga and Sterling died of hypothermia about halfway through the long walk to the trailer.
That would also be additional trauma, as we talked about, like when they finally do arrive to the trailer, not making the necessary connections required for survival about actions they can take to keep themselves warm, find more food, etc., that they've just witnessed two of their friends die.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a long walk, it's a long walk and two of your friends are dead.
Right. It's assumed that once they found the trailer, the other three broke the window to enter. Since it was locked, they may have believed it was private property and feared arrest for theft if they used anything else they found there. After Weir died, the others might have decided to try to get back to civilization in different ways. And so those are kind of the theories I saw. I tried to go onto Reddit to see, and there really isn't that much information besides, like, there isn't really any theories there, which is crazy because I feel like there usually are.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this would have a bunch of theories because there's not a lot of information. Like, I feel like it could be so many different things.
Yeah, and the information I found was all like the same.
That's definitely an anomaly for this case because I've looked it up in the past. I listened to a podcast about this and it was years ago. And then, you know, looked up to see if I could find more theories on Reddit, as one does, but had the same experience that it was just a lot of people saying, oh, it was probably this, it was probably this. A lot of people talking about Occam's razor, you know, like they died of hypothermia because they got lost, but then that doesn't explain why they were going up the mountain in the first place. That doesn't explain why they kept walking up the mountain instead of down the mountain when their car got stuck. You know, like there's so many unexplained questions here, but for some reason Reddit seems totally fine with just being like, I don't know. Like, it's so unlike Reddit to just accept strange happenings exactly the way they appear. And that's what I found when I researched this case years ago. It could have changed, but based on your description, sounds like it didn't.
There's like the weird things with the people before, like the different cars around. But I feel like, yeah, the main question is just why were they there in the first place? And I don't think that's something we're ever really going to know.
Never.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so sad.
What a crazy case.
Yeah, that's especially one of them was never like laid to rest, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is awful because then you never know.
I find it hard to believe he could have survived if the other four couldn't.
I don't.
But that also that he would have survived and not looked for his family or told someone who he was, or that there would have been, you know, some resolution there of him trying to like find his way back to home, to family. I find that hard to believe that, you know, if he was alive, that would have happened. So I'm sure he probably died around the same time as the rest of them.
But to play devil's advocate too, he probably did die with the rest of them. But like, say he somehow did manage to get out of there, he would have been off of his medications, which he had been religiously taking for the last 2 years.
That's true.
And his family did say anytime he came off of those prior, it was really rough.
That's a really important point. Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to take a step back and say that it's possible that he didn't, you know, instinctively look for home because he was off his medications. That would, yeah, it's not implausible.
But I do, like, someone probably would have found him, you know?
Right. Yeah, someone else would have seen him and been like, oh, wait, isn't that the guy that everyone's looking for?
Yeah, or like, who are you? Or he would have gotten into trouble or something.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, wow, my brain is like spiraling.
Yeah. That's a spiral case. That's a good fan pick.
It was really good. Thank you so much
to Kelly again.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for your suggestion. My case next week is also a listener suggestion. So if you've sent in a case recently that hasn't been covered yet, ooh, it might be you. Tune in.
We've got a couple coming up.
Yeah, we love the
Yeah, we
listener
do.
suggestions. Gonna put my normal plug in here that if you live in a small town and something weird happened there that is unexplained, weird, creepy, even if it's like kind of explained or like mostly
Yeah.
explained, let us know. We want to know about the weird shit that happens in your small town because we've covered our small towns. We've covered a lot of the surrounding small towns in our area. We want to know about your small towns. So hit us up at Small Town Mysteries Pod on Instagram. We love to get DMs. If you want to send pictures of your dogs, that's also okay. Some people do that, and I love it.
Wait.
What?
Animals.
Animals.
Animals in
You don't-
general.
Just
Fine.
dogs?
Fine,
That's
no.
rude. You just cut out all cats. What is wrong with you?
Okay. We've only been sent dogs so far, haven't we? Did we get a
No.
cat?
The first one we got wasn't even a dog, I want to say.
Oh, okay. Then I stand corrected.
I don't think that it was a cat either. I think it was like, maybe it was a reptile. I don't know. I want to see all of your, even if it's a turtle or something.
No,
We
I don't
love-
care, whatever.
We love pet pictures, so even if you're just like, hey, I have a cute pet that I like to show off, please show it off to us. Yeah, someone did send us a reptile. Oh my gosh. It's a bearded
lizard.
dragon.
Oh, yeah. That's a type of lizard, right?
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you so much. Come spiral with us next week.
Bye.
Bye.
That wasn't bad.
No.
That was decent.
Yeah.
I'll take it.